Okay, I am going to try to share with you exactly in real time how I do my sourdough, and especially how I feel like the timing of what I do, that can be the trickiest part when you're first learning how to do sourdough. It was for me. Like, does my whole life have to be surrounding this process? And if you have young kids at home, I have a lot of moms and dads that have young kids at home that are like, I want to make sourdough. And I'm like, it's a commitment because you're feeding something every day and helping it grow. So, this is my morning, just morning time. So, if you're trying to get the kids off to school and then after that it works better, or if you get up before the kids and you have a few quiet minutes, whatever time in the morning, this is going to be your first step to feed your start. This is my active start. So it gets fed and used regularly. That's what I mean. And I just pulled it out of the fridge. It had one day resting in there. And sometimes that, it doesn't matter. But this is an active start that gets used regularly. I just have a number of these deli containers. They're the easiest way. I name my starts. If you've read my book, Sourdough and the Savior, I have Mary and Martha. Martha gets used a lot. I used this painter's tape. It probably needs to be replaced. You can see it's curling up. But my discard is in the fridge too, and it's labeled Love. And I actually have a third start in the fridge, and that's from my friend Sue that started me on the journey. So I just put this is the start that I'm going to feed. Here's my scale. I put a clean container, move the label, and then I put in, I get 2 loaves out of each time. If you're doing 1 loaf, you don't need it to feed as much of your start, but I measure out around, let's see what's going to come up. It's between 85 and 80 grams, and that usually gives me 2 really good loaves. That's 86. I'm just going to leave it. That gives me 2 loaves with a little tiny discard. I don't mind having some discard in my fridge because I make pancakes once a week with that. Sometimes I do a Sunday recipe for dessert with my discard. So, but if you're trying to be careful about your budget and you don't want a lot of discard, then you can get even more specific on how much. Then my bread flour, I measure out exactly how much of my start. I do a 1 to 1 to 1. Some people do it different, but I have found that works just great. So 86 grams of bread flour, and then clear your scale. And then you're not going to see me, but I'm talking to you because I have filtered water that's in my kitchen sink attached to it. And so I just use it's actually reverse osmosis water, but if you have filtered water, some sourdough experts say you don't need to have special water. I don't know. I've just never done it because I have it in my kitchen. So, and then there you go. You get a little, my first thing of water, I'm a little bold with because I know it's not going to be close, but the second one, I'm like careful so that I'm exactly what I want to be, 86 grams. And then you just stir it up. You just stir it up, get your scale out of the way, stir, stir, stir. This is my morning. This is what I do in the morning. My dog's over there eating. I had someone ask me the other day, I need to come over one day and go step by step with you. The thing is like she's a young mom and she wants to learn. And I think my system is really friendly for if you have a young family and you're trying to take care of your kids. And so this is what I do. Now, on my counter and in my book, Sourdough and the Savior, which is available on Amazon and cedarfort.com, it should be available in a few more places soon, but I don't have that information yet. I give tips in each chapter. Each chapter of the book, I give tips, like how I use it, the deli, like name my starts and use shower caps, I always do that, shower caps and medical gloves and all that. You're going to see that through my process, but it's also, I think it's helpful to see the timing. And so I just started doing this. Sometimes I used to just close it all the way like this. My friend Sue, who teaches classes and started me on the sourdough journey and who I dedicate the book to, she leaves hers a little popped open. So I've mixed 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. I'm getting 2 loaves out of this, so that's why it's 86 grams. I've done 80 grams and that works too, but sometimes if I go over 80, if it's within that range, it's great. And then you've seen this probably if you've seen any sourdough content. The little rubber band tells you. I still use this even though I know my start is active. This just tells me when it's gonna double. And then in my book, this is what I was gonna start to tell you. I bought a bread box. I think there's 2 loaves in here. Oh yeah, it's kind of full. I keep my cut loaf in here, and it's a special bread box with little holes in the back so it lets some air escape, but it keeps it from drying out and molding. I've had it mold sometimes, but that's only when it's taken us a lot longer to eat it, which we normally don't. Oh, I was like, what is on my sleeve? So after I feed my start in the morning, I just put it in. I'm going to take this loaf out. This is a new loaf. I'm going to bag it up to gift it. I just put it in my bread box for the day. And then tune in sometime in the afternoon. That's how general it is and flexible. Like, if I had fed this yesterday, which I didn't, it had 1 day of rest, it would probably be ready by 2. In the summer, it's ready by noon. And then I'm tuned in. I'm going to show you the next step. I promise it's going to be all in this one video, but I'll look different because I will have gone to church. That's when we're going to do our first step of forming our loaves. And I'll walk you through it. Super simple, but if you have my book, Sourdough and the Savior, this is following my recipe, and it's just going to sit in here and grow today. That's what it's going to do. And like I said, that it changes, my growth rate changes as the weather changes. You know, my kitchen's a little colder because it's in the dead of winter, the dead of January. And in July, you know, it's just warmer in my house. And so, but this bread box, and I have under counter lights, and so this is a little more, helps it be a little more consistent. But I just go about my day. So if you're a young mom and you have time in the morning, feed your start. Set it aside. And then think in your head, after school, or if it's in the summer or whatever, afternoon time-ish, that's when you're gonna form your loaf. And we'll do that together so it's not overwhelming. Okay, friends, step 2. I've now showered. This is post-church outfit. And we're doing our first step in the loaf making process. There's technically 3, I can't do a 3 with this hand very well, 3 steps at this stage. And I'm going to take you through it. So first we're going to talk about utensils and equipment. I make 2 loaves out of this is mine now. Can you see? It doubled in size. We fed the start 1 to 1 to 1 ratio of bread flour and water to start. It's now doubled. It's in the afternoon. It's 2:30 in the afternoon, but it was probably ready about an hour ago. I just wanted to wait and do it. And so that's where I'm sharing with you. If you have a kid's busy life and you're trying to figure out sometime in the afternoon, you want to give this step enough time. This is your fermenting step, okay? So our little sourdough is telling you I'm ready. And then I have my scale, if you can see it, and my bowl. I'm going to make 2 loaves out of this much start, but I'm only going to film 1 loaf. So it's just, if you're doing 1 loaf from your start, which would be half of what I did in measuring, great. If you're doing 2 like I do, then just repeat this part of the video because you'll do it twice. I like having a really flexible spatula and a really thick one that's stiff. And I like to wear medical gloves. I go through a lot of medical gloves, and I go through a lot of shower caps. Disposable shower caps on Amazon. I line my bowls, and this first loaf is gonna go in here, and then I will cover it with this so it doesn't dry out, and then I put a towel over my 2 loaves, and they sit on the counter through the fermenting process, okay? I get out my salt. I use a fine pink Himalayan Redmond salt. You can get this on Amazon. I actually sent some sourdough to this company, to one of their executives. I haven't heard back yet. Maybe you didn't like it, but this is my favorite. Some people don't like the fine pink Himalayan salt because they find it's gritty, but I'm going to talk you through what I think I do to help that salt kind of dissolve. And then I have a 4-cup measuring so that I don't have to go back and fill up my measuring for my 2 loaves. But if you're only doing 1 loaf, I just get about 2 cups of water, and that will measure out how much grams of water you're going to need. Okay, and then I have my King Arthur bread flour. That's the brand I use. It's not a paid endorsement. It's expensive, I know, but it's what I've used from when it started to work for me, and I've stuck with it. I get it at Target, fun fact, and I use my red card. So there's a little discount there. Okay, here we're gonna start. Zero out your scale with your mixing bowl. I like to use my flexible spatula for this part. And I'm not super exact, but you want at least 50 grams of this nice, gooey, live, and I always give it a little bit more, especially in the winter. So that was 56. It's fine. This is why I feed it a little extra, so I always have a little extra. Then I happen to have a measuring teaspoon that's 2 teaspoons. So I'm going to zero mine out because I never do it now. I just do 2 teaspoons of salt, but it ends up being around 12 grams of salt. So I do 2 teaspoons of that. And then I make sure it's zeroed out, because then you're going to measure exactly on water. Now, you know, if you get a little extra start in there, it may need a little less water. I do 300 grams. My original recipe I started with called for more than that, 325. And I found it to be too sticky. The feedback I've gotten from people about my sourdough is that it doesn't dry out. This happens a lot. I poured in too much water. That's why it's important to zero out your food scale before you do your water portion and your bread portion of your flour. Because then I try to make sure, I mean, if I'm a little over 300 grams, fine. Now, but I found the first few months when I was learning that what the original recipe I was working from, 325 grams was too sticky for me. It never like formed that like gluten smoothness to the dough that you're going to eventually get. Okay, so enough talking about that. So 300 grams is what I say in my recipe that's in my book, Sourdough the Savior. And then I know, because I've done a little tiny research, this is unusual. A lot of recipes have you do that in a different order. I like doing sourdough start, salt, and then adding the water before I add the bread flour, because this is what I do. I kind of break up, helps dissolve the salt, breaks up and distributes evenly the start, the sourdough start. I don't know what the science is behind that, because I know there's some recipes that are different. Then zero out your scale again. And I use pretty close to right on the mark, 500 grams of flour. Because it can start to get expensive, you know? So the more you can preserve your flour, like Target has been out of my kind of flour. Walmart was out on Saturday. The good thing is, once you've gotten all your water, your salt, and your sourdough at the bottom, and you pour in your flour, I always don't get exactly a perfect pump. And then because it's a dome on the top and the flour is dry, that's very on the top, I can take away just a little bit of flour and make it exactly 500. Okay, this is where you can take it off the scale and you just start working with your flexible spatula. If you just have a regular spatula, that works too. I just happen to have had 2 different kinds when I started learning, and I find with my arthritis, it helps. Having gloves also helps, because at first I wasn't using gloves and I was washing my hands so much. And you're going to go through a lot of like counter cleaner, because even though I do all this in a bowl, I know some of you sourdough experts, you do it on the counter, you do it old school, you don't use gloves, you don't use shower caps. Don't come for me. Be nice. Don't come for me. This is just my way of doing it. And I've had the gloves have a little bit of dried flour on it because I used these yesterday to do my final formation of the loaves I just baked. And so if they don't have too much dough on them, I just save them and reuse them. So I try to get a couple of uses out of them, but this first step is sticky. So I'm doing this. I'm forming, I should have showed you at the beginning. You just start forming all that flour and bread in there until it starts to form. It's sticky. This is the sticky stage. So this is why I like having a really stiff spatula, because it scrapes. And I know there's some really cool dough scrapers that are fancy tools. I just use I'm pretty basic spatula. And then what I do at this point is I go around and I scrape all around the bowl for where that water and flour first stuck, and I scrape it down and scrape it down and scrape it down. And then I try to take, and at this point, this is when these gloves are super helpful, because I was starting to get cracked hands. I was washing my hands so much making sourdough at the beginning. And then you just start forming the dough, and I'm going to show it to you. You're just going to form the dough like this, and it's going to look like you're making progress. It's dough. Now, this is the thing I do. It's still sticky. It's still what they will call, what's that word? It's kind of shredded looking. It's not formed like a perfect dough yet. And that's okay, because I'm going to tell you in a few minutes what we do next. So then I put it inside of here, and then I go back through the bowl and I scrape out as much as I can of what got stuck in there. You see that just a little bit? And I sprinkle it on top of the dough, and then I form it all in, and sometimes it's a lot more flour that's kind of been left in the bottom of the bowl, and I incorporate it into that. And I don't try to make this pretty. You're going to come back in 20 minutes, and I'll come back and do this with you, and you're going to form this, and you're going to already see that that gluten is starting to form, and your dough is starting to get, I don't know the word, doughy together. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do it one more time, then I'm going to stop the camera. I cover it up with this shower cap. I reuse these two. Don't be afraid. I cover it with my little towel and leave it on my counter. And then I'll see you in a few minutes, because we're going to just maybe 20 minutes. I don't stress about it. It's sometimes 15 minutes if I've got to leave the house, if you got to run the kids to soccer practice, and you don't have a good 20-25 minutes, it's okay. Do a couple of minutes, let it sit there and rest, and then you're going to come back and I'll show you what you're going to do, and that will be your step 2. Okay, friends, this is step 3 in, I was trying to kind of, not counting cooling off to give it away, a 5-step process to making sourdough. It is still the afternoon. I cleaned up. I had a fruit snack. I'm still eating my fruit snack. I got a new set of gloves. I mopped the floor because there was flour everywhere, and I came back. So there's not an exact time, but somewhere between like 10 minutes to 30 minutes. But if you're like, I've got to leave for piano lessons or whatever that is, and I don't have time, just give it a few minutes to rest and then come back to your dough. Like I said, I'm working on 2 loaves, but I'm going to just show you in the one. So here you are. I'll do the first one I did. Here you are. Here's your loaf. It looks about the same. It doesn't look like it's changed shapes at this stage. This is step 3. You are going to pick it up. This is where you can already tell it's starting to, the gluten in it, the natural gluten in it is working, or whatever you call, and I just form it like this. I keep tucking it under itself, and you can tell right now it's already more like dough and less shredded looking. And it's sticking together. And that's it. It doesn't have to be super fancy. Plop it back in there. cover it back up. I'm going to do my second loaf, but if you're only doing one, you can tell this one's a little sooner and it's still got some flour that didn't get incorporated. That's when you can like kind of work it in. And this was the second one I did, so it's not rested as long, but I can still form it and see that it's starting to get stuck together and looking like a dough bread, you know? And then usually there's some, depending on how much was sprinkled in from the leftovers in the bowl, and you just try to form it like that, like a ball. It's not going to be perfectly smooth. This is your fermenting process. So cover it again. I don't know if it needs the towel. Maybe it's the empty nester in me that likes to tuck it in. But then it just sits on my counter. Now this is where the secret is. This is your fermenting space. Two options. Give it a couple of hours. If it's in the summer, it's going to be ready to form in our fourth step quicker. If it's winter like it is here now, it may take a little longer, but this is my life hack tip for sourdough makers. If I do this step and I know tonight I have an event, but it's not going to be ready to fully form and then put in the fridge for the rest of the night, and that's the secret tip that I'm going to share with you next video, I leave it in the fermenting stage, this stage right now, after I've just done that step I just showed you, the rest of the night until I come home from my event. And that's because if it goes crazy at this stage, it's just going to be a little more sour flavored. It's not going to mess up and over ferment. The next step that we're going to do, if you let it sit out too long, it gets unmanageable. And so if you have a place to be, if you have a game you've got to go to, if you have an event you've got to go to, and you don't know how to time this part of the process, leave it on your counter as long as you want until you're ready to come home and go to bed. And then our next video, I'm going to show you what we're going to do. And the secret sauce to all of this, to working with a busy life, is the refrigerator. Because the final step I'm going to do tonight before I go to bed, I form it in baskets with parchment already under it. That's how I do it, so it's ready for baking in the morning. But once I can see it's starting to rise again, I put it in the fridge for the night. And so this is a much more flexible stage to not be stressed. You're not going to be like over at dinner with your friends and think, oh my gosh, my sourdough is a disaster because I left it out too long. You're not ruining it. It's just going to ferment longer. And it may be really, you know, I'm not going to do that tonight because I'm going to be home the rest of the night. But sometimes I leave, I go to the movies, I've been gone for hours, it's been fermenting for hours. It tastes great. And it hasn't ruined anything because I come home, and the minute I get home from wherever I've been at, that's when I form it, put it in my parchment, and I'll show you that more in the next video. Go wash my face, get ready for bed. By the time I do all of that, it's ready to go in the fridge for the night because I can see it's already starting to rise, and it's going to be fine. And it's going to keep rising in the fridge overnight, but it's not going to get out of control. It's not going to be such a mess. Now, if you've been making sourdough as long as I have, you will still get mess ups, and you can make focaccia bread with your mess up dough. But the goal here is to show you, and I keep standing in tree pose. That's what I keep doing. I keep standing in tree pose at my counter. This is the stage that if I can, I will reuse these gloves for that final forming stage, step 4, okay? Step 5 is baking. So step 4 is still coming, and I just lay these on top of, here you can see, they're laying there on top of my bread loaves on the counter. And I also have a little thing I can put them in my drawer, and then I reuse those again for my final. They'll probably be done by that time, and then I'll have to get some clean gloves tomorrow when I do this again. So stay tuned. You're almost there. Don't stress. This needs a couple of hours to ferment, and the way you'll know is it will start to grow. It will kind of double in size. If you have to leave the house and it gets even bigger than that, you haven't messed it up. That's the genius of my timing and using the fridge. Okay, see you soon, couple hours from now. Okay, we are on step 4, and I'm going to just show you. I have my parchment paper. This is, sorry for the loud noise. I wrinkle it up so it stays in my basket. So I have 2 sets of baskets. Sorry for the loud crinkling. It may not be satisfying to listen to that. So I crinkle it up so it forms easier into the basket. And my bread's been fermenting longer than necessary because we had dinner and we cleaned up, and so I'm going to just show you how much it's doubled and grown. But like I said, if you were gone for the night at the movies or at an event or at a play or kids, whatever, it doesn't matter how big this has gotten because you are perfectly on time. So before I get ready for bed, parchment in the baskets. I have this little flour shaker, and it's just bread flour inside. And I flour the inside of my basket, and I reuse these shower caps. So the ones on top I set aside, and this bottom one is going to be the covering for this basket. And it's really kind of sticky at this point because I've let it ferment a lot. You're going to have to work it out of the basket like this. But that dough is ready. And just form it until it's super smooth right here on the top. Kind of just tuck everything in, stick it in, and then dust it lightly with some bread flour. And that's just so that when you put the shower cap on and it sits in your fridge at night, it won't stick too badly to the plastic on here. I'm going to do this to my second one, and then I'm going to wait a bit. I'm going to go get ready for bed, do all the things. This is pretty fermented, so it's gonna start to grow again perfectly for me to put it in the fridge for night. And it's gonna stay in there. So I'm gonna put it in the fridge in a little bit, and it will stay there all night, and it will keep growing, but it won't get out of control, like if you had left it out. And then we'll see you in the morning to score your loaves, get your pans ready, and bake it. Okay, see, they are way past ready because they were over the dishwasher and it was super warm. So these are the things I'm putting in. These are the loaves that are going in the fridge, and they're way ready. And they're gonna just sit in there tonight, and they're gonna be perfectly ready to score and bake tomorrow. Okay, good morning, friends. I'm so excited to share with you the 5th step. Technically, it's not the final one because they're not cooled and baked already. But here's our loaves after being in the fridge all night. See how they perfectly rose? If you remember how they were a little lower than this when we put them in the fridge last night, even though it was super active. Fermenting stage went long yesterday. I take off these shower caps. Remember, I'm doing a 2-loaf recipe, but if you're just doing a 1 loaf, it's totally fine. Get back out your little, I love before I score, this is one of my favorite parts. I get my bread flour back out and I shake a little layer on it so that when you score you can see your pattern. Now listen, I have started preheating with my Dutch ovens in the oven quite a bit ago. So I get up in the morning, turn on the oven, put the Dutch ovens in there, and once it hits 425 and they've sat in there for a while, then they're nice and hot and ready. So you didn't see me do that step, but just know that that's already happened. Other thing, if you have fake lashes like I do, I had to get these like science goggles because this oven is 425. It's super hot. And my lashes were turning into little L shapes. And we didn't know why. And it was because I've had lashes, fake lashes, since I finished, well, probably the last 10 years after I did my last round of chemo. My lashes didn't really come back. And I had never had them do that. And I didn't know what was wrong. This is a little fun fact. And then I had started baking sourdough. That's what had changed. Not my soap, not my shampoo. The heat from the sourdough oven at 425 was melting the tips of my lashes. So if you have fake lashes, get some protective goggles. Okay, I use this scoring tool. Here's my replacement blades. A lot of sourdough experts and bakers have fancy wooden scoring tools. I like that this is stainless steel. And I'm going to try to show, I don't know how I'm going to show you this. I'm going to tip my loaf and I'm going to just try to show you scoring. Okay, friends, I thought I was recording and I was not recording, and so now I'm a little stressed because we are to the point where we got our loaves out of being in the fridge all night. One of my loaves is already in the Dutch oven. I started my oven to preheat at 425, put both pans in there until I was ready to score. These protective goggles are for my fake lashes. I started getting fake lashes about 10 years ago, but I only started sourdough baking 2 years ago. And all of a sudden, my lashes were starting to have weird little L shapes, and we realized they were melting. After I did a year of chemo, my lashes never came back, and so I get fake lashes. So if you have fake lashes, get goggles. This is my scoring tool. My scoring tool is just a stainless steel. Here's my replacement blades. I got it on Amazon. Some people have fancy wood ones. You have to sometimes tighten it inside of here with this knot, with this bolt, because it gets loose. And then I thought I was recording, showing you my scoring, and it wasn't recording. So I'm going to just show you, pretend I'm doing this. I dusted both my loaves with my bread flour so that you can see your pattern. I did 2 close together lines this way, so they're little stripes, and then I did a wheat pattern, is what sourdough bakers call, in between those 2. But this is how it looks before I bake it. And get some good hot mittens. And because I used parchment paper in that final forming before we put them in the fridge last night, I don't use the slings that there's silicone slings. There's lots of ways in which you transfer your dough to your Dutch oven or to your oven if you have a bread oven or you use a stone. I just use the parchment. And then sometimes I'll reuse it twice. Like, I'll bake with it today, and if it's not too crispy, I'll dust it off and use it again on one more batch. And then you just put your lid back on your Dutch oven. See that? Put it in your oven. And my recipe that I have in my book, Sourdough and the Savior, is with the lid on 22 minutes. So set your timer, 22 minutes. And then I come back at 22 minutes and put my goggles back on and take the lid off and cook it another 12. Now sometimes, like if I haven't preheated my oven as long or the weather, my son likes my bread a little crispier on the crust. I like mine a little lighter because it stays soft. Some people don't love that sourdough gets a little crispy to chew. So I do mine a little lighter, but you can, once I hit the 12-minute mark with the lid off, I check it. If I want it to darken up a little bit more, just leave it in there a minute more. So check back. Our next step will be pulling those loaves out of the oven. And it's always a surprise to see how the scoring turned out. It will cool and then we'll be done. So here we are at morning time. I fed my start this morning, just like we talked about at the beginning. So here's my fed start. We've started the whole cycle again, and that's going to grow today. And this afternoon, I'll start all over again with my process of forming my loaves, letting them ferment, and then before bed, forming them in the baskets with the parchment, put them in the fridge, let them sit there all night, getting up in the morning, and then you can bake them. So hopefully that really helps, especially the busy moms that want to try sourdough. Okay, moment of truth. I am about to pull out my 2 loaves. I hope this has helped you see that even in a busy schedule, especially with the tip of using your refrigerator, you're not completely, tied to your kitchen and your house all day just to do a batch of sourdough. So let's pull out our loaves. Oh, they're heavy. This is my big one. This is the medium sized one, and then I will I will show you how great it is to have this parchment paper. So the parchment paper just acts in a sling. I pull it out of my Dutch oven and stick it on. I'm going to show you how the loaves turned out after that scoring. But they cool. I try to give them a couple of hours before I bag them up to gift them. But if you're in a hurry, sometimes I'll like stick them on the back porch in the winter. And, you know, let them cool down a little bit faster, but it helps if you're not hurrying. So let's see the final product. Here they are. So this was the bigger pan. You can see how it expands a little bit more than the medium Dutch oven. And then I just let them cool. And I have some finished ones over here I'm going to just share with you. I bag them up. These bags are really great. You can buy them on Amazon. I've been putting on Sourdough and the Savior stickers to gift these away. And these 2 loaves were made yesterday, and they're going to be gifted to some people. But thank you for joining me. Let me know in the comments. I know everyone does sourdough just a little bit different. I love that, even though it's basically salt, flour, and water. I hope you'll pick up a copy of Sourdough and the Savior, and each of the chapters share a little tip for baking sourdough, but also my journey of healing, my journey of faith, my journey of unemployment and empty nesting. And then at the very end of the book, it has my full Ganel-Lyn's easy sourdough recipe. I'm going to walk in here and pull out a copy. Here it is. So hope you can pick that up. And I would love to hear from you in the comments, on social media, any of the platforms, about your journey with sourdough. It's been really healing for me emotionally, spiritually, socially, and for my body with lupus and my gut. So enjoy.